to you. Our text today is Numbers chapter 10, verses 11 to 36. The previous chapters have been about God getting his people ready to cross the Sinai desert before they began the march towards the promised land. And now we're looking at the chapter when they finally began this march. The first 10 chapters of the book of Numbers deal with a period of just over a year, but mostly it's condensed to a 2-month period where God was giving specific instructions to his people. And then the next chapters of the book of Numbers, chapters 11 to 24, they focus on selected experiences scattered throughout the next 40 years. Numbers 25 to 36 focuses on the developments that took place in the 40th year. So we see that structure of the book of Numbers. Numbers 1 to 10, God getting his people ready. Numbers 10 to 24 deals with a 40-year period. And Numbers 25 to 36 deals with the events that took place in the 40th year. The structure we've been using is that now it's time for God's people to set out. God has been getting them ready. Now they are setting out. Sadly, the people's trust in God wavered in the face of the challenges and difficulties they would face. They would not act in obedience as a result. They failed to take possession of what God had promised them. It was only a short journey, and it was only 57 weeks since they had left Egypt. And yet of all of those who left Egypt as adults, only Caleb and Joshua would enter the promised land. The whole generation spent 14,600 days, 2,080 weeks, or 40 years, eating manna in a desert and wandering around when they could have been enjoying the fruits of the promised land. But as we come to our text today, they are starting off with great excitement. It sends a shiver down my spine as I read this text and try to imagine what the mood must have been like in the camp on that day. Just imagine what must have been going through their minds and hearts, the excitement when the silver trumpets blew, because the cloud had lifted and had begun moving. And Moses said, it's time to go. We're off towards the promised land. Even saying that just gives me a tingle of excitement. It sends a chill down my spine to think about this historic event. Let's look at our text. Chapter 10 will start with verses 11 to 13. On the 20th day of the second month of the second year, the cloud lifted from above the tabernacle of the covenant's law. Then the Israelites set out from the desert of Sinai and travelled from place to place until the cloud came to rest in the desert of Paran. They set out this first time at the Lord's command through Moses. And then we see in verses 14 to 16 that they began to march just as they had been instructed. The tribe of Judah went first under their standard, commanded by Nashon, son of Amminadab. Then the tribe of Issachar under their standard, led by Nathanael, son of Zurah. Then the tribe of Zebulun under their standard, led by Eliab, son of Helon. In verse 17, the tabernacle is taken down. Then the tabernacle was taken down, and the Gershonites and Merarites who carried it set out. And so all of the holy items would have been packed away, loaded onto the carts and the wagons, as well as the tabernacle, as they prepared to set out. And then we see how the other tribes all set out in the order that had been prescribed to them through instructions given by the Lord and spoke to them through Moses. So far, so good. God's people are doing what he told them to do in the order and the manner in which he had instructed them to do it. And finally, the cloud is moving. The wagons are trundling along. The people are marching. They are heading towards the promised land. How exciting. Nothing had been left to chance. God had given clear and concise instructions on how they were to march and in what order. Each tribe knew their role. There would be no squabbles about who should go first, no petty rivalries about preeminence and so on. They each had a leader, guided by God through Moses. Those at the front, the tribe of Judah, might fear what lies ahead, for they would be the first to encounter any challenges. Those at the back may have feared sudden attacks of marauding bandits who would steal their possessions. But to keep them safe as they marched in the order of the cross, God had made meticulous plans on how they were to do it, so that the tribes could be safe in the order they marched. God has his way of doing things. If the people obeyed him, which so far they are, they responded to the Lord's command through Moses, it would have been a glorious future for them. Then Moses speaks to his Midianite brother-in-law. Now Moses said to Hobab, son of Reuel the Midianite, Moses' father-in-law, we are setting out for the place about which the Lord said, I will give it to you. Come with us and we will treat you well, for the Lord has promised good things to Israel. Moses knew where he was leading the people because God was guiding them. He knew that God had said to them about the promised land, I will give it to you, I will give you a land I promised. The Lord had promised good things to Israel. God guides us as his people. It's important we know what he has said to us and what he has promised us. But look at this. Moses had the guiding cloud. He was hearing the voice of God, but he still hoped for the support of human companions such as Hobab. Hobab knew the desert. He would understand the weather patterns. He would have a lot of practical survival skills. When the cloud stopped and the Israelites came to camp, he would know where to place the tents in the best positions to protect from the desert storms and desert conditions. The places to pitch the tents for maximum protection. So Moses wanted him to come along. We as God's people, we need the wisdom and skills of each other. Even when God is leading and guiding his people, and it is God and us working together, we all need human expertise, not just our own, but that of others. We need each other as the body of Christ. We cannot do it alone. And Moses realized that he needed the help of this man, Hobab, his wife's brother. So Moses realized he still needed human help. So he sought that help, and God didn't scold him. This spiritual giant of a man needed human support as well as divine guidance. And that is an important and powerful lesson for us as the people of God. God knows how much we need one another to accomplish what he calls us to do. Each of us can be the Lord's gift to somebody else. But Hobab wanted to go back home. He answered, no, I will not go. I am going back to my own land and my own people. But Moses said, please do not leave us. You know where we should camp in the wilderness, and you can be our eyes. If you come with us, we will share with you whatever good things the Lord gives us. Hobab didn't want to move to another country, but Moses persuades him. So Hobab agrees to go with him. And we see later on in the book of Judges, a long time after Israel had entered the promised land, that Hobab's descendants were among them. And so this man stayed with them throughout the entire journey, throughout the Sinai desert. And his descendants, children, the next generation, entered the promised land with Joshua and Caleb. But we see God's compassion in Moses, the human help he needed. Didn't Jesus tell us to pray for labourers, because the harvest is great, but the labourers are few? We see God's providence. Hobab's destiny was to be Moses' eyes in the unfamiliar terrain that lay ahead. We see God's reliability. Moses wanted Hobab to recognise God's word and promises as being reliable. He said, "We will share with you whatever good things the Lord gives to us." The Lord has promised good to Israel. We see God's generosity because the Lord had promised good to Israel. Moses knew the covenant promises would also belong to Hobab if he kept the covenant obligations. He was welcome to be a part of God's people and enjoy their blessings and be a recipient of the gospel, even though biologically he was not Jewish. And there we see a shadow of the gospel, right there, that we Gentiles are part of the covenant God made with Abraham and his descendants. Because of Jesus Christ, we are brought into that covenant with him. And all peoples of any race, ethnicity, nation are welcome to come to Christ and be a part of his glorious body upon this earth and receive all of the blessings of eternity that are promised to us in the scriptures. But even with human help, Moses still looked to the Lord to give the guidance that no human ever could. And the people as a whole still looked to the Lord to guide them. It says in verse 33, "So they set out from the mountain of the Lord and travelled for 3 days. The ark of the covenant of the Lord went before them during those 3 days to find them a place to rest. The cloud of the Lord was over them by day when they set out from the camp. Whenever the ark set out, Moses said, 'Rise up, Lord, may your enemies be scattered, may your foes flee before you.' Whenever it came to rest, he said, 'Return, Lord, to the countless thousands of Israel.'" So the ark of the covenant, God's presence, was with them as the cloud guided them through the wilderness. And so we need human help, but human help can only give so much, because we need God's guidance over and above all, because God can guide all of his people in a way that no human ever can. And that is something God has promised us as Christians. And that it's important we understand and trust that, because he will lead us. He will guide us. Jesus himself promised as the good shepherd that he would not only feed us, but we would hear his voice and he would guide us. So Moses gave praise to God. Gifted leaders had been appointed. The men of fighting age had been counted and numbered and were ready to deal with any threats that came across the travelling Israelite community as they moved from Mt Sinai towards the promised land, towards their future. Silver trumpets rallied the community for action or worship whenever needed. A great cloud protected them from scorching heat during the day and guided them, and a huge column of luminous fire was present at night. So God's people still sang praises to him, and Moses said this praise prayer as a request. "Rise up, Lord, may your enemies be scattered, may your foes flee before you." And whenever it came to rest, he said, "Return, Lord, to the countless thousands of Israel." What excitement, what a calling they had, what a glorious destiny, what a promising future, as the tribes of Israel take the first steps away from Mount Sinai, begin to go through the Sinai desert through the wilderness towards the promised land. Moses was so optimistic as they set out on their march. He knew that God had promised good things to Israel, and that's why he had promised Hobab, you'll receive all of the good things that we would also receive. He was confident at this stage that the Israelites would carefully enter the promised land of Canaan. As all of the tribes of Israel began to march towards it, Moses was excited. He was optimistic. What could possibly go wrong? Join me next time and we will start to find out what did begin to go so horribly and terribly wrong, and the reasons why it went wrong. God bless you.